Hello everyone and welcome to Developing Your Skills with Adobe Fresco. I'm Spencer Nugent. I'm a designer, all-around creator, and educator based in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I've been practicing for about 16 years. Ideas are a big part of what I do. Most of my projects involve coming up with new concepts and sharing those with clients. And so being able to conceptualize something and express it very quickly is important. Adobe Fresco has changed the way I work. And I want to show you some tips and tricks to help you move from paper into the digital world and back to paper if it helps your process. There are many things that are similar between drawing on paper and drawing on a tablet that I think go hand in hand with each other. Creativity for me is all about finding those uncommon connections between things that may not be so obvious. It may not be obvious that it makes sense to start on paper sometimes and go to digital, or vice versa, start digitally and go back to paper. In addition to that, Adobe Fresco gives you an entire studio at your fingertips. It's really awesome that I can go anywhere and work and be creative, whether it be the coffee shop, my friend's house, or hey, if I'm enjoying the great outdoors here in Salt Lake City, Utah. 2020 was, let's admit, a weird year. And for many of us, it meant increasing the distance that we had between our loved ones and even those we work with. The great thing about Adobe Creative Cloud is that it can connect us all no matter what we're doing. So new in Fresco this year are collaboration tools and additional tools that help speed up the process of conceptualizing ideas. Before we get into it today, I do want to call out and mention that there are two things. One, the workbook has links, resources, and information for you, whether you're just starting out drawing or you want to sharpen up those skills. And the second thing is I've compiled sample sketches and resources for you to use along the way. You can copy those to your Adobe Creative Cloud library using the instructions provided to you. Since we're drawing on paper today, it's really important that we warm up, and I cover a few things about how to hold your pen, how to orient yourself, and just about attitude. I find that as a creative, how I feel oftentimes goes into my work. So just relax, we're gonna have fun, and I hope that you enjoy this process as well. You want to make sure that if you're drawing that you're positioned in a comfortable spot, but also make sure that you are as in line with what you're drawing as possible. So sit upright, look down at your drawing, and pro tip, it's actually good to stand up while drawing. I have with me some simple tools. These are staples in my toolkit as an industrial designer, and these are a Sharpie, Papermate Flare, brush pen, and a ballpoint pen. How I hold my tool actually matters, and that goes hand in hand with how I'm positioned and actually how I draw. As I'm drawing, you want to make sure that your hand is holding the tool about halfway up the barrel. This is going to do a few things. One, it's going to give you the opportunity to have a very loose and free grip, but also holding my pen a bit more up the barrel will allow me to see the rest of my drawing on the drawing surface. And this is important, especially if you're anticipating putting a line somewhere. You need to have an idea of where you're going. It's a little bit like life. More on that in a minute. So let's go ahead and warm up so we can get ready to draw. I'm going to be using my fine liner pen to do a few warm-up exercises, and I'm going to focus on three things: lines, circles, and ellipses or ovals. And these are important components of product design sketching because they are the building blocks of rational geometry. If you look at any product, many times you can identify things like circles, lines, ellipses on those products, and a variety of curves. And my ability to execute those elements is important because if I can't do that well, I can't create clear concepts. So let's start with lines. For my lines, I'm going to start by placing dots on either side of my page. Now the goal here is to draw a straight line from our dots at section A to section B. Now one thing I forgot to mention is how I actually execute the lines, but this is actually a great time. When I'm drawing, I try to pivot my shoulder and my elbow and lock my wrist. You can kind of think of your arm like a cyborg or robot arm. We want to have very fluid, loose movements, but also lock that wrist in place. It's going to feel a little bit weird, but I promise you'll get some good results from it. So let's start with our straight lines. And this motion that I'm doing is called ghosting, or hovering over the page. I'm telling my muscles what I want to do and then I'm going to execute. So let's go ahead and start here. Just like that. Now it's important that as I'm drawing, again, I'm using my shoulder and my elbow as a pivot. And the goal is really to have a line, like my second one here, where we have a nice even flow that is consistent and it starts and stops at those dots. Okay. Up next, we're going to do some circles, and I'll do the same thing here. Again, pay attention to how I'm holding the pen. Further up the barrel, ghosting, and then executing. My circles are about 2 to 3 inches in diameter typically. And the goal here is just to get those muscles warm. The third exercise is focusing on ovals or ellipses. So an ellipse is effectively a circle viewed at an angle. The top of this cylinder, for example, is a circle. And when viewed at an angle to the camera, on my overhead here, you can see that we have an oval of differing heights or widths, depending on how you look at it. Okay. Being able to draw ovals is important if I'm drawing something cylindrical. Think about a flashlight, hair dryer, thermos, cup, that kind of thing. To do this warm-up exercise, let's draw 2 straight lines. And I'm going to start with a very skinny oval. It's almost like looking at my cylinder from a very shallow angle. And I'm going to progressively draw ovals that are representative of this circle all the way up until it's viewed directly from the top. So we'll start skinny like that and keep progressing down the page. I'm not being as picky with the precision, but if that's something you want to focus on, we can do that as well. My goal is to just open these up and keep moving down the page. All right. Now, ideally, you want to do this multiple times a day, definitely before you sketch, and over time you will see that progress. Okay, consistency over time will help you get better. And it doesn't matter if you're starting out or if you're seasoned, these small exercises can help you sharpen up. In fact, one of the benefits of warm-ups like this is we're actually inputting in our brains real information that we can use. I'll give you an example. So if I take 2 ellipses, say this one, and let's go ahead and use this one here, and I'm going to draw a few lines like so, a few lines here, and I'm going to go over, down like so, and I'll just capture this other ellipse, and before you know it, in no time, maybe you can guess what I'm drawing. I'm drawing a car. Okay, so in no time, with the right curves, you too could be drawing your very first automobile. Okay, now I have years of experience doing this, so there's a lot to it, but I do want to point out that these warm-up exercises are important because the principles that you're applying here can be used for real products and real objects. So don't underestimate the power of the warm-up exercise. And there's our quick sketch of a car. All right, we can pack it up and go home, right? Just kidding, we're just getting started. Drawing on paper is super fun. I absolutely love it. That's where I started and learned a lot of the techniques that I'm showing you today. To make drawing on paper a little easier, there are 2 methods I like to use. When in doubt, rough it out, and light until you get it right. Both techniques work and involve a similar flow. So I'm going to start with when in doubt, rough it out. Let's say I want to sketch a computer mouse concept or 2. I may start with an oval, and we could even use something like this Sharpie to start our sketch. And I'm just going to throw a little arc here and start to create a shape for this mouse. All right, so maybe something like that. And we have a wheel for our mouse. I'm gonna just rough in a little cutout here, and maybe there's some sort of texture thing here. I don't know yet. And our mouse buttons, of course. So now when I'm ready to actually sketch my product, I'm gonna switch tools, and let's go ahead and use the ballpoint pen I find that when I'm sketching on paper, sometimes an idea feels more appropriate for a different tool. That's something you kind of have to decide for yourself and figure out on your own. But in this case, I feel like using this ballpoint pen. Now, if you've worked digitally, you've actually used this concept before, which is create a rough or reference layer, and then, like putting this sheet of paper on top, I can now see the lines underneath and execute my concept. All right, so let's draw. We can start to define our design a little bit. So we don't have to go completely along with what we sketched. We can always change things as we go. Maybe in this case, we want to add some sort of affordance. So there's one mouse. Let's go ahead and do another. And I'm going to start with a circle as reference, and we can sketch in those other lines. So when in doubt, rough it out, meaning if I'm not sure of how to even draw the thing, but I have a rough idea, we can figure it out underneath, make some corrections, and then when we're ready, create an overlay. As far as techniques for an overlay, I'm going to give you a tip here, and that is instead of tracing what you did before, try and resketch. Resketching means that I'm using what's underneath as a reference, but I'm not beholden to it. I can change the design, I can change a line, I can change a feature, and use what's underneath for reference. So instead of sketching slowly, sketch quickly, sketch freely, and use your shoulder and your elbow, and you should have a really live and exciting sketch. Let's do another concept, and in this case I'm going to show you another technique that I like to use when drawing, and that is light until you get it right. And you can do this in two ways. You can use something like a gray marker or a pencil to lightly execute your idea and then execute with the tool that you want to use, say something like a Sharpie or a fine liner pen. So I have here a 30% gray marker, and let's sketch a chair, just a simple chair. So I'm going to start by drawing a box. And fortunate for you, I've included links to resources that will explain how to draw in perspective. All right, and this will come into play a little bit later as I show you an interesting tool in Adobe Fresco. So I have here a rough proportion for something like a chair, like I said, height, width, and depth. Okay, now since I have this box, I can actually divide this box roughly and lightly because we're using gray marker. So place some legs, and then for the back of my chair, I'm going to come up and let's have the back at a slight angle like so. All right, and because I have this wireframe here, I can actually map out my design. Now let's give our chair's seat some volume. Make this a little bit of a wedge, and maybe we can repeat that shape for the back. I feel like that would be kind of cool. So just like that. So I know where my legs are going to go. Something like so. And we can do this cool thing called drawing through, which basically means drawing on the back side. If you notice, I've drawn through my shape there and vertically to make sure that the placement of everything is reasonably accurate. Now that I have my light line drawing, I can emphasize the parts of the design that I want to emphasize. So I'm going to take this fine liner now, and let's go ahead and resketch what we had. So similar to the computer mouse, I can start by just resketching the parts of this chair that I know I want to keep. So if there's anything you want to change, we can change that along the way, but figuring the perspective out up front is really the first step. And let's go ahead and sketch in our other leg. This one, we'll actually see the side of the leg, like so. And now for the back of the chair, I'll just go ahead and throw in two supports here. All right, maybe these connect to the seat or the legs on the back side. Get your lines down, sketch, be loose, be free, and before you know it, you too will have a quick chair concept. All right. If you get hung up on perspective, check out the workbook and the resources listed there for help. But I'm going to show you another way to do that inside of Fresco. Now that we've completed 2 drawings of 2 different ideas, let's play around with them in Fresco and see what we can do. So this is Adobe Fresco. I've opened the app, and when you open the app, you're presented with this basic view. We have home, your work, learn, discover, create a new file, import and open, or some custom sizes that you can tap on. You can also learn how to use Fresco right here in the app. For our purposes today, I'm going to hit custom size. And when you hit custom size, a pop-up will appear, and that'll give you some options for dimensions of your work. If you're used to working in a given print size, you can tap on print, and I'm going to select tabloid with the drop-down selected, hit switch to landscape, and now I'm going to create that document. When you hit create document, I'm presented with the interface of Adobe Fresco. On the left side, we have a bunch of tools that you can use, and a lot of these will look familiar. We have 3 different types of brushes, more on that later: eraser, smudge, move, select, paint bucket, shapes, text, eyedropper, and a little icon that looks like a picture. We're going to be using that one to import our work into Adobe Fresco. We also have the opportunity to pick a color and change that color, manipulate it, adjust brush settings and sizes as well, that little number 8 you see on the screen. And we can also control the flow of pigment in a brush, smoothing for that brush, and additional settings in that brush. That's the left side. On the top right, we have settings, collaboration, undo, redo, and share, as well as an option to hide the interface if we want to do that. Tap that icon and the interface appears again. On the right, we have show hide layers. We have layer properties, grids, commenting, more on that later, create a new layer, hide or show layers, clipping, masks, and adjustment layers. All right, and there's additional options for the layer. If you tap the button with 3 dots, that'll give you some additional options for what you can do with the layer, motion, and a ruler as well. We're not going to be messing with those today, and I'm going to keep it pretty tight for you as it relates to my process. Adobe Fresco uses 3 types of brushes, as well as different layers that work with these brushes. It might sound a little confusing or complicated at first, but it's actually really simple. If you do get lost in the process, you can always reference the workbook where I explain these concepts to you. The first brush is a pixel brush, and with each brush I can tap on the icon and I'm presented with a bunch of brushes that come by default with Adobe Fresco. I can also add brushes to my favorites. So under basic, if I really like, say, the hard round opacity brush, I can tap that star and now it's in my favorites right at the bottom. Okay. And if you really like the default brush, for example, we can go to sketching, pencil, and I can add that to my favorites as well. The pencil's really cool. I'm using an iPad Pro today, and that means that I can draw with this brush and tilt and get a little bit of a shade going. It's really fun to play with. Up next, we have live brushes, and those come in 2 flavors. We have watercolor live brushes and oil live brushes. The watercolor live brushes, super fun, easy to get lost in the mix here, but as you can see, painting on the canvas actually replicates real world effects. It's really fun, and it's added a whole new dimension to how I sketch my products. There are other options like the spatter, and with these brushes we can control the size, the flow of pigment, and the amount of water in that brush. If I'm committing these changes to the layer and I want to layer my brush strokes on top, I can tap on a layer and hit dry layer, and now when I apply that effect, it's almost as if it's brand new. So you can come up with some really interesting textures and effects for your sketches using live brushes. The next brush type we have are vector brushes, and vector brushes are similar to the vectors you might get in Illustrator, except these are executed by hand, by you, the artist and the creative. A vector brush will create a new layer, and these vectors are crisp and clean, and no matter how much I zoom in on this vector shape, it is absolutely crisp. They're really cool brushes to use for line work if you're doing a really precise illustration. If you're like me and you have your own set of custom brushes, or perhaps you have a favorite creative that you've acquired some brushes through, you can actually import those brushes into Adobe Fresco. And this all works seamlessly through Adobe Creative Cloud libraries. So if you're working on Photoshop and you have brushes in your Creative Cloud library, they will be available in Fresco. It's pretty awesome. So scrolling down, you can see this little box that says library brushes. I can tap on my Sketch a Day brushes, and these are all my brushes that I really like to use when I'm doing my product design style sketching. It's nice to have the ability to have what I'm used to using right here at my fingertips. So let's go ahead and clear these layers and get ready to import our work in. So if I tap on the layer, I can hit clear layer. I can tap, and let's go ahead and delete that layer. You can always tell if a layer is a pixel or vector layer by the corresponding icon next to the layer. This layer is a pixel layer, for example. Let's start by importing our chair sketch into Fresco and making some changes to it. To do that, I'm going to show you two different ways to import your work into Adobe Fresco. The first way is by using a companion app called Adobe Scan. Adobe Scan captures images and documents, cleans them up, and puts them in a format that makes it a lot easier to work with. So we're going to use that. When you open the app, you're presented with an interface like this. You can see I'm logged in, and I'm going to tap this camera icon. Now my camera's open, and let's see if we can capture here my sketch. It's trying to find the corners of my document. So I'll hit capture, and it's doing its best job to determine where the corners are. If I need to move these corners, I can just tap and precisely place them where I want, like so. Hit continue, and Adobe Scan is processing that image. Now when I tap on the image, I have a nice clean sketch of that chair. All right. I'm going to go ahead and hit Save PDF, and that's going to save it to my Cloud Documents, Cloud PDF documents. But to use this in Fresco, I need to save as a JPEG, and that's going to save it directly to my photos on my device so that I can import them into Adobe Fresco. So let's go back. Here we are in Fresco, and to import our chair sketch, I just tap on the icon that looks like a little picture, and let's tap Photos. And here we have our chair. Boom, it's imported. Now we are presented with the interface called Transform, and here I can manipulate the image that I just imported. If I take my two fingers and pinch, I can zoom out, and now we can see the manipulators or handles on that image. If I want to scale this down, for example, I can take the corner right here and scale down or scale up. If I want to rotate, just take this handle in the middle that's a little bit extended and rotate out. I should also mention that the blue circles you see on the screen are meant to just show where I'm touching on the screen. So if you don't see those in your app, don't freak out. It's all good. All right, so let's scale this up a little bit, and I'm not going to make it the full size of my sheet here. Let's hit done because I want to show you something. Here you can see the canvas that we started with, and we have our image that we scanned that's kind of sticking off the edge. What I need to do is tap on that layer and hit convert to pixel layer, and now everything gets trimmed to the canvas. That means that I can now manipulate this image by erasing, painting, or adding effects to it. Speaking of erasing, let's tap the eraser, and now I can kind of clean up just on the outside of this sketch anything I don't want as a part of the sketch. Now, looking at my design, I realized that I made my chair a little short and stubby, and this is one of the ways I speed up my workflow, where I can take a part of a sketch and move, manipulate. So maybe I want to show this chair in its parts separate from each other, or in this case, I'm going to just take, let's move this out of the way, my little nudge manipulator. And I'm just going to stretch these legs just a little bit here. Okay. Stretch those legs. Stretch those legs. If you need to stretch your legs, go ahead and stretch your legs. And I'm going to move this leg. Oops, let's deselect first. And just move this leg a little bit down. All right. Now we're kind of chopping up our sketch, and that's okay because I happen to have brushes that work for me. So I've got my own fine liner brush here in Fresco, and so now I can kind of modify my design. All right, I can sketch in here if I need to emphasize something. This brush is great because it has a nice texture that's a lot like the texture I get when sketching on paper. So I don't feel like these additional lines will be too obvious, and they'll kind of blend in with my main sketch. All right, so we'll just tighten that up, and if we need to keep cleaning up, we can do that with the eraser, for example. All right, just like that. If you prefer to, you could clean this image up on your desktop and just save it in your photos or send it to yourself, and you would have it available on your iPad here. If you do use Adobe Cloud Documents, however, and let's say you're working on a PSD file on your desktop, that file would be available for you in Adobe Fresco as well. All right, just a little bit more here. All right, so now we have our sketch, and let's go ahead and color this. So to color our sketch, I'm going to change the layer properties. So let's tap our layer properties, change the blending mode to multiply, and now on a layer underneath, I can start coloring. So let's go back to my brushes here, and I'm going to pick my marker brush. And how about we make this chair a blue upholstered fabric? So let's go ahead and shade this in. Now this is underneath my sketch line, so that means that the sketch will continue to show through, and I don't have to worry about the lines bleeding on paper. If you've ever drawn on paper and you use something like a marker or paints with it, oftentimes what will happen is the water or the pigment might interfere with those pen lines and cause splotchiness or bleeding on the paper. So it's really nice to be able to color the sketch without having to worry about that. Let's jump back to my brushes. I'm going to pick this Air Highlighter Soft, and let's pick a dark gray here. On a new layer, select Blending Mode Multiply, and now I can airbrush in a little shadow on the edge of the chair right there, right where it rolls back, just like that. All right, let's kick the opacity back ever so slightly and clean up where we need to clean up. All right, pretty cool. Just like that. And let's go back to my marker brush. So I mentioned that if you have favorite brushes, you can save these and access them at any time. So jumping to my favorites, I'm going to select that basic marker and now pick a nice deep blue. Smallerize my brush, make it smaller, and now on the side we can kind of shade in here. And the reason for this is when you're showing something three-dimensional, you want to make sure that you have contrast in the right places. So where a surface changes direction, okay, so where we have the side of the chair, I need to make that a little bit darker. All right, so just like that. Now let's go ahead and shade in the legs, and I'm just going to use this kind of maple looking color here and pick our brush, and we can just shade this in as well. Just kind of scrub it in like so, and now we have some maple legs on our chair. Pretty cool. And this is what I would consider to be a rough sketch, so I'm not super worried about the precision here. All right, shade this in. And remember, we made a mistake back here on our chair. So I can fix this in one of two ways. One, I can pick the sketch, make a selection, tap the layer, and I'm going to hit Cut Selection, tap the layer again, and Paste Selection. And that just cuts and pastes what we selected. So now I can move this over. And since it's on its own layer, I can switch the blending mode to multiply as well. We can effectively select and transform the color that we created, and also, oops, wrong layer, also move that color to fix our mistake. It's pretty awesome. Let's go back to the sketch, clean up my little arrow here. Just like that. And Oh shoot, I just realized that I need to pick the same brush. So we go back to favorites, there it is, colors selected, we're good to go. And now I can just shade this in on my color layer. So one of the nice things about working digitally is I can work in a non-destructive way, meaning I can modify or express other ideas without messing up my initial sketch. All right. And I can change things if I need to, or in this case, add a shadow. And because it's on a different layer, I'm not impacting those other colors. All right. So really handy tool to have. I'm going to make the shadow a little bit lighter. And now what if I want to group these layers together? Just tap, hit, select, where is it? Select multiple. There we go. I always forget where these are. Select multiple. Now I can select the layers I want to group. Tap on the folder icon here, and now these are all grouped together. So that means I can move all of these layers together just like that, right? Fresco is warning me that because I move my sketch to the left side here, that areas outside the bounds of the canvas will be cropped, and that's okay. I know I don't need that part of the sketch, so I can hit continue and position this one here, hit done. And let's say I want to duplicate this. I can tap on the group, hit duplicate layer group, now move this over, and in fact I can flip my sketch horizontally, scale, and place this sketch on another portion of my sketch page. So we'll be using this principle again to show multiple concepts on a page, but I wanted to show you how easy it is to work and duplicate concepts so that we can show multiple things on the same page. Let's go ahead and put together a sketch page using the computer mice that we sketched. Now, since I'm in my studio and I have access to my scanner, I was able to scan these images and place them in my Creative Cloud file folder on my computer. Now I should have access to those files when I hit my import icon, select Creative Cloud, and under Max 2021, I have all my sketches. And I'm going to import a couple of these, but we'll start with the first set here. Now we have our images placed. I'm going to scale these up a little bit and place them somewhere here. Hit done. Let's import some more from Creative Cloud. Let's go to Max. And I'm going to pick these computer mice, the rough sketches, and hit open. Now the rough sketches I'm including in the composition more so as ideation filler, if you will. But if I had other ideas, I could place them somewhere here on the page just fine. Now, if I want to reorder layers, just tap, hold, drag up, and now my layer is on top. We're going to use the same trick that we did before, which is to place our image, tap the layer, tap the layer, hit convert to pixel layer on each of these so that we can now manipulate. In addition to that, under layer properties, I'm going to select multiply. And now let's work on placement and scale. So depending on which concept I want to show off, I may decide to, say for example, flip these sketches and rotate. We'll continue. And let's make a selection here. Let's take this concept and make it a little bit smaller. If we make it smaller, it means that it's a little bit less important to the composition. Okay, just like so. And now I'm going to select my other sketch here. Actually, let's deselect first. Select my other sketch here, and now I can kind of manipulate this one. This one's a little bit more interesting, so I'll make this one bigger on the page. All right, just a little bit bigger there. Okay. Hit OK. Let's deselect and hide my layer properties. And now I have a quick sketch page. All right. Let's go ahead and add some lines to this composition. So under my favorites, I'm going to pick fine liner. And let's add a little sketch background here for my concept sketches. Okay. And let's make sure this layer is set to multiply as well so I can see those sketch lines on the layer underneath. Just like that. Now to make our sketches pop. We'll add some lines here, just like that. Increase the line weight on the outline ever so slightly, and we'll do the same on our main concept sketch. Nice crisp lines. So working digitally after starting on paper can be really fun, especially if you have brushes that are similar to what you use on paper, right? And if you have your favorites, remember those will sync automatically to your Creative Cloud library. All right, so let's color up one of these. And to do that, I'm going to make a new layer. What I tend to do when I'm sketching is I like to have my sketch layers on the top and my colors underneath. So here I'm going to take a simple gray and red. So let's go to my brushes, this hard round brush. So we'll take the gray, for example, and let's create an outline, and we can fill the inside of this for some quick color. Grab my paint bucket, tap, and now it's all filled in. And let's just clean up the boundary. Just a little bit there. And I'm feeling kind of red right now. So let's go ahead and take a red color. What I also tend to do is if I have a new color, place that color on a layer below the previous color, especially if you have two parts that are meeting up next to each other. All right, just like that. And we can do the same fill trick. Get that done really quickly. Fill in like that. And we're like 80% of the way there. All right. Now I think it would be cool if the wheel had some of the color of the body of the mouse. So we'll go ahead and do that like so. Yeah, there we go. All right. Also, you may notice that I'm tapping on the screen with 2 fingers. That just allows me to undo, or 3-finger tap, redo. So 3-finger tap, redo, 2-finger tap, undo. Okay, just like that. All right. So I've got some basic colors down. Now I can start to shade on top of those colors. I'm going to jump in here, grab that air highlighter, and let's pick a nice dark color here. And now just over the top, we can place a nice coarse shadow. Really fast way to show some 3-dimensionality. We can scale this up on a new layer. And if I just want to show a little bit of a return on the surface, for example, just airbrush over, and now I'm going to erase what we didn't have. So contrast is going to communicate your 3-dimensionality as you're sketching. So here's an example of using that airbrush to create a shadow over the red right next to that gray spot. It's really cool. All right. So now I want to work on some highlights, and let's use our air highlighter, some white. We'll scale this brush down quite a bit, and now just on our border here, we'll have a little bit of white. Okay, just like that. If you want to get good at this part of drawing, I highly recommend drawing from observation, because it's when we draw from observation that we're then able to draw from our imagination. All right. Oops, I was scaling the wrong brush. Sometimes I do that, but it's okay. It happens to the best of us. All right. So now let's switch to my nice soft airbrush here, and I just want to lighten up a little section on our mouse right through there, as well as this flat surface because it's facing upward. And we can erase what we don't need, like so. And again, you can see that having the light right next to the dark really helps that pop. I quite enjoy using the basic marker brush here to kind of help with these highlights or shadows. So in this case, we can scale up and work on those highlights. And now this is starting to feel a little bit glossy. And let's do the same on our mouse wheel right through there. And now we have a very quick shade of our concept that started on paper. And here we are finishing it up digitally. All right. So let's say I want to add some quick texture to this sketch. I have an image that I copied and I'm going to paste it here to use as a texture. So tap on a layer, hit paste from clipboard, and now I have this dot pattern image. And I'm going to scale this up to about this big, hit done. And if I go into my layer options here and change my blend mode to multiply, I now have dots on this surface. Now it's not super precise in the sense that we have a wrap on the surface. However, it's enough to communicate the concept. So let's make a selection right in this area, like so. And I'm going to tap on the layer. Oops, let's tap on the layer. Hit convert to pixel layer, tap again, and I'm going to duplicate and hit done. Let's hide the layer beneath, change our blending mode again to multiply, and now I have that texture as a part of my sketch. All right. Now, since it's not exactly following the geometry here, what I'm going to do is now cut a portion of this and paste it. We'll do the same thing with blending mode. And now I can adjust things like the opacity, for example, just like so. And on this separate layer, if I only want the texture on the top surface, we can place it like so. Now, like I said, it's not a perfect representation of that texture. However, it's enough to communicate a little bit of the design intent behind having the texture there. All right, so you can kind of think of it that way. Let's add a little bit more glossy here with my marker. See if we can obscure the texture just a little bit, like so. And up above, let's deselect on a new layer. Look how many layers I have. So working with this many layers allows me to have flexibility in my approach, and that's why I try to have as many layers. All right, adjust our opacity, switch to multiply, or you could play with color burn as well and see which looks better. All right. So now I've got a nice texture, I've got some shading, and the only other thing I want to add here is a slight shadow, something I wouldn't be able to do as easily on paper. So with my hard round brush, I'll just create a little outline here, nice and rough. Let's go ahead and fill that in and adjust the opacity on my layer so it's really light. And now my concept is floating above the other sketches. Pretty cool. Now, if I want to bring those other sketches to life, let's make a new layer. We can pretty much put this anywhere as long as it's below our main sketches. And I'm going to use that airbrush again, the air highlighter. And now for these additional concepts, we can just paint in a coarse shadow that says, hey, this thing is three-dimensional as well. Don't forget about me. I'm here. And here we go. Just like that. So now our other sketches have a presence on the page and we have a rendered concept. I like to think of these concept pages a lot like music, where we have big beats, small beats, melodies, rhythm, and so forth. A new addition to Fresco is the addition of tools and guides to help you make your drawings more realistic. For example, the perspective exercise we did on paper is easy to execute in Adobe Fresco. If I tap this icon that says guides or grids and tap on grids here, I have the option to pick a perspective grid, and I can select 2-point, 1-point, or 3-point perspective. I already have a 3-point system set up, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. But let's say we wanted to sketch something like a chair. I'm just going to use the default brush here. But with the guides, you'll notice that all my lines are actually moving in perspective. Okay, they all relate to each other, which is pretty handy if we're setting up, for example, a wireframe for our concept. All right. Now I see this more as a help for you as you're drawing. All right. There's above and below the horizon line as we're drawing. And I can draw this box to kind of help me orient myself as I draw, just like we did on paper. Okay. So now if I turn off these settings, create a new layer, I can sketch. Oops. Let me go ahead and turn this guide off. I can go back. You got to make sure you turn that guide off if you're going to sketch. But now on a new layer, I can sketch my concept just like we did before. So if you need help setting up that guide, Adobe Fresco's, or setting up that perspective system, Adobe's Fresco's guides can help you do that really easily. All right. And before you know it, you'll have, let's do a different back here. You'll have a chair concept. Maybe this is more of a lounge chair or something. All right. But at least the beginnings of our concept will be grounded in real perspective. So if you've been interested in drawing in perspective, the perspective guides are a great place to start to help you understand these systems, how they work, and what that means for your drawings. All right, so we can turn off the layer below, and now we have our chair drawn in proper perspective. Pretty cool. So let's say I'm working with a client and I need to collaborate and I want to show an idea in two different ways, but I've done my sketch on paper and I really don't have the time to do another version. Fresco makes it really easy. I've imported my sketch onto the canvas, and now let's go ahead and duplicate this sketch. Tap on the layer, hit duplicate, and go back to transform. Let's flip it horizontally, move it down, and scale slightly like so. I'm going to hit done, and it's already set to a pixel layer. I need to do a little bit of cleanup here, so I'll just do that by hand by just erasing a little bit around my sketch right there. Just like that. You know, put on some good music or a Netflix show. Enjoy yourself while you erase parts of your sketch. All right. It takes a little bit of time, but it's also relaxing. Okay. So there's my additional concept. And the reason I'm erasing this is I don't want to set my layer to multiply, because if I set to multiply, the other concept is going to overlap and the colors will interfere with each other. So just want that lace to be able to kind of poke through a little bit. And let's go ahead and scale this guy up just a little bit like so. So now I have both my sketches placed on the canvas. However, it's a little bit weird to have both being the same color. And as I mentioned, I want to show my client perhaps a different design or change in the color, material, and finish, and maybe some design details. So now that my shoe sketches are cleaned up, I'm going to create an adjustment layer to alter the color of one of my concepts. Let's take the concept on the top and to the right and tweak the colors. Tap your adjustment layer button and select hue saturation. And now I can play with the hue and saturation of this concept. So if I wanted one that was a bit more yellow, for example, we could stop there or slide until we get something like a nice blue. Once you're done, you can tap on the layer and hit merge down, and now I have two concepts. In fact, if I want to make these even more different, we can sketch on top, for example. Just grab my favorites, the fine liner, one of my go-tos here, and maybe I want to change the shape of, say, this little portion of the shoe. We can adjust that, maybe have a line there, or maybe a few lines if that's something that we wanted to add to our design. Pretty cool that we can make those changes just on the fly. All right. So now we have a slightly different design, or it might be something like the tooling itself. Perhaps we want to change the appearance, add some element to it. All right. Maybe we're thinking of some stuff here that we want to communicate to our client. All right. So I've made some changes, and let's go ahead and add a note. Right, maybe this is a certain material, and I'll just put some dummy text in here. All right, but I'm just calling that out to my client. And the other thing I want to do is maybe add some texture to this. So let's go ahead. I went ahead and imported a fabric So I will make this visible, and now we can drag this over the concept like so, and just kind of place it where we want the texture. So maybe the texture is on this entire upper. I'll hit done and change my blend mode to multiply. And now let's go ahead and I'll use the selection tool here to get a nice rough selection. And we'll adjust it after we duplicate. Missed a little spot there. Okay, tap on a layer, hit duplicate, done, and now turn off the layer below. Switch our blending mode to multiply or overlay can also work. You can play with these blending modes and see what you like and what works for you. All right, I'm going to go with multiply on this sketch, and just to help this pop a little bit, now I'll take my airbrush, the air highlighter, all right, and just come over this concept and make sure that things are kind of popping. Get some white, all right, just over there. Maybe kind of make this one a little shinier. All right, stuff we couldn't really do on paper. Erase what we don't need for contrast, just like so. And now our sketch is really popping. So you can work on paper traditionally and jump into Fresco and really give your sketches a different look that you might not be able to on paper alone. Okay, so creativity again is about making those connections that may not seem obvious, and one of those is working analog and digital using Adobe Fresco. Now, as I mentioned, if this is for a client and I want my client to be able to comment on the change that I'm proposing, I can actually tap on the comment button right here, and I have an opportunity to share the link so that they can comment as well. If I hit share link, I can copy this link and share it via email to my client, and they'll have an opportunity to comment as well. Or I can kick things off and say changed tooling outsole. And now my comment's logged, and when I share the document, they'll be able to see that comment. In addition to that, if I'm working with another designer, I can tap the collaborate button on the top of the screen and type in an email. I'm going to type my own email, spencer@sketchaday.com, and I can invite to edit. So now if I'm working with another designer, they will have access to the file provided they have a Creative Cloud account as well. Really, really cool feature. We all know 2020 was a really weird year, and we put some extra distance between us all, creatively and otherwise. And so being able to collaborate over distance, no matter where we are, is really, really important. Thank you so much for joining this lab. I hope you had fun. I certainly did. Adobe Fresco has become one of the critical tools in my toolbox that I love to use. Not only can I start on paper that I'm familiar with and transport those into Fresco, but sometimes I can work the other way too. Get creative with it and you'll see what's possible. As a reminder, the workbook's been provided full of resources for you, whether you're sharpening your skills or just getting started. You'll have links, information about the app, and tips for you along the way. Also, there are assets provided that you can copy into your Creative Cloud library, sketches that you can play with, compose sketch pages, or if you're wanting to learn to draw, you can trace or resketch those sketches to see if those principles start to click right up here. And that's where it matters. Remember, draw from observation so that you can draw better from your imagination. Thanks everyone. Take care and enjoy the rest of Max.